Welcome to another Grown Woman Talk High Achieving Women conversation. Love to have you here. I'm Charese Josie, licensed clinical social worker, licensed therapist, and I want to talk to you about nagging versus communication. So I want to be clear about the intent of this conversation. It's not to determine, am I a nagger, am I communicating, and what do I need to do so that my husband does not think that I'm nagging, or how do I not be the problem. I want you to listen to this conversation. I want you to kind of go through it, and I want us to first redefine the term nagging. Nagging is a term that really drives me nuts. I'm not a fan of the term nagging. And the reason is because normally when it's usually used as a way to gaslight. It's a way to shut you down. It's a way to make you feel like what you're saying or thinking or feeling is not valid. And so when someone says it's nagging, it's one of those piercing labels. We're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a nag. But then there's never a follow-up of what to do. So then how do I get these feelings across? How do I show you or talk to you about what I'm thinking, about what I'm feeling, if however I'm saying it, you, my husband, perceive that as me nagging? That's why I'm not a fan of a term, because it's never defined. Because if it's clear on what is the miscommunication, if we're clear on what is it and how we're saying something to our spouse, the timing, our tone is a problem, why aren't we discussing that versus a label, right? So that's why I'm not a fan of the term nagging. But in reality, it happens. It happens in relationships. It happens in communication, and especially when there's a whole lot of things going on in a relationship, when you realize that you and your spouse are arguing about a lot of things. Maybe the arguing is even in silence, right? So maybe it's even silence. But either way, like, I'm not sure how to approach this because I don't want to feel like I'm nagging. So I want to talk to you here about some ways to address that. And also, if nagging is a term that gets you like it gets me, we can also talk about some other ways to communicate with your spouse to say, hey, this is how I would like for you to tell me what you need from me, maybe without telling me that I'm nagging, right? And you can say how that makes you feel when that happens. Now, you get to decide and judge your relationship of how you can approach this conversation, but I do want to give you some tips as we dive into the conversation. All right, so stay with me. All right, so one reason that I hate nagging, I think because it makes us hyper vigilant about how we feel, right? Should I ask? Should I say how I feel? Should I say what I want? Should I say all these things? And we just don't know what to do. And now we're in our emotions and we don't know where to put them. And I want to be clear about that because I want you to know how high the risk is if you don't communicate about how that word might trigger you. Right? And it's okay that it does trigger you. The goal is not to say, well, I don't want this word to trigger me, because that's what's happening. Right? So honor yourself and say, no, I don't like being called a nag. Could it be true? Maybe. We'll talk about that. But if you don't like it, own that. It's okay to own that you don't like being called a nag. All right, so let's do away with the term. So tell your spouse and say, you know what, instead of saying that I'm a nag, talk about what's actually bothering you. Hey, I don't like when you come to me with that tone, right? I don't like when I'm getting ready for work and you want to have a conversation with me about something. Ask him to say exactly to you what it is that he would like from you and what is the issue, right? What's the issue and what do you like me to do? We take out the guessing, and then we take out this emotional burden that we put on ourselves. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense. So here's a definition of nagging. I looked it up, and honestly, I was a little bit hesitant because I was watching some other videos about nagging, and as I was watching it, I felt my blood pressure come up. And the reason is because it's like a message of women, stop doing this. Women, stop doing this. And if you want this, you need to stop doing this, right? And the thing that bothers me about that is that because we're complex people, right? We're complex. We have a lot of love experiences. We have a lot of life experiences. And frankly, we have a lot of pressures. Now, that does not absolve us from the responsibility of how we should engage in our relationships, but I don't like the message that we're the problem. So I had to scale back from some of them videos and just do what feels right for me, right, and how I want to work with you. So the definition of nagging, and I just took this from Google. Feel free to Google it and look it up, right? So constantly harassing someone to do something, or doing or saying something with a sense of urgency, right? Like, you have to do this right now. I need this at this point, and that type of thing. So someone might say, you know what, you are nagging me because you keep saying the same thing repeatedly, right? So it makes sense. I can see how a spouse may have that impression, or may have that type of, thing, like, oh my gosh, you're asking me again. Oh my goodness, you're saying this again. So I'm going to talk to you about maybe some trends that happen and some things that maybe we can do better, with the goal that we don't feel emotionally depleted when we're trying to share how we feel. And also that our husbands can hear us in a way that we want to deliver it. Now, to be clear, they may not like it, right? And also, we may not get exactly what we want, but we know that there's some clarity and understanding in the communication, right? Not that you say something, it gets shut down, and now everyone is frustrated, and that's just where it left. That we want to try to avoid. So let's kind of dive into a few tips as we go through this, okay? All right, so let's dive into 4 ways so that we can effectively communicate. We already went over, let's try to replace the word nagging if it's something that triggers you. And also if you feel like it just stops the conversation and you start to overthink, am I saying too much? Am I being a nag? Then what do I do? Here's some 4 tips. The first thing is that I want you to only ask genuine questions. That means I want you to only ask questions that you really want to know the answer to. So sometimes as women, right, we'll say things seeing what his response is going to be. Have you ever done that? Yeah, I've done that too, all right? Sometimes we'll say things because we're in the mood and we just want to let him know that I'm in a mood, right? That I'm mad, that I'm feeling some certain type of way. So we'll say or ask things. Are you going to go do that? Right? Now, do we really want to know the answer? Not really. Probably not most of the times. When you're in a state of wanting to clarify, want to have some communication, ask a question that you really need to know the answer to. Maybe it's not actually a question when you think about it. This is how I view and how I kind of gauge people of asking a question that you really want to know the answer to. I want you to think of all the possible answers that you can get. Think about all the ways that this person can answer the question. And then I want you to determine, are any of those ways realistic? Or is there actually a true answer to this question? If it's not, say, you know what, maybe it's not a question. Maybe I'm just feeling something and I want my spouse to relieve that for me. I want them to alleviate that for me. But now we're putting something on them that they don't even know it's their job, right? They're just thinking it's a question. So if it's not a question, then don't ask it. Just take care of the feeling or say a statement. But if you actually just need connection, you need validation, it's okay to say, I just need connection. I need validation, right? And communicate that to your spouse. So number 1, only ask questions that are genuine. Number 2 is I want you to say what you need one time. So what happens in nagging is they feel like, oh my gosh, you keep saying the same thing. You keep saying the same thing, right? So here's an example. When are you going to get your degree? Do you see how that's like an open-ended question, right? Well, I'm going to get it sometime, or I've looked into a few things, and you're like, here we go, right? No clear answer. So then you're going to ask again, when are you going to get your degree? I told you last time I'm going to look into it, right? What happens is that we fail to ask questions with a time frame on it. Say, hey, do you think that you're able to get your degree by the end of December? Do you think you're able to start classes by the end of December? If you look, can you start classes in the fall? Is that something that you want to do? Do you see how you're giving a time frame on it? Now, sometimes we get to the point where there are really serious consequences if things don't change, right? I don't like to call them ultimatums because I think that sounds bad. I like to call them informed decisions, all right? So maybe there's something that you and your spouse have been dealing with a long time and is depleting you emotionally, physically, spiritually, and all the things. You're like, I can't continue in this way, right? Now, maybe that might be an informed decision. Like, hey, if this doesn't happen by this time, I have to do what I need to do to take care of myself. And if you know what that is, say it. Full transparency, say what that is. And make sure you're saying the truth. These are no threats, and these are no empty promises. Say what's true, okay? So the third thing, that brings me to the third thing, I want you to focus on the facts only. Sometimes we communicate emotions as if they're facts, but they're actually emotions. So maybe I may say, I feel like you don't do enough around the house. That's an emotion, right? Versus a fact of saying, hey, can you clean the bathrooms by Thursday? I'm saying specifically what I need, and I'm also giving a deadline, right? A time frame that's good for me. And then your spouse gets to say, yes, Thursday is reasonable for me. Or yes, I'll clean the bathrooms. Or no, I'm not cleaning the bathrooms, not today, tomorrow, or by Thursday, right? And now you know. But when you focus on facts about exactly what you want in a time frame, it gives more clarity to you and also to your spouse, where there's little to no room for misinterpretation. So the fourth thing is, I want you to know your desired outcome. Now, be careful on what I'm saying. I want you to know your desired outcome, but I don't want you to predict it. So what that means is sometimes we say, well, I'm saying this hoping that my spouse will say this, or I'm doing this hoping that I'll get this response in return. No, we're not going to set your spouse up for failure, or even for you for failure. But I want you to know, is what I want actually a realistic outcome? So here's a real silly example, right? Maybe when I got married, maybe I would think, oh, I'm married now, my husband and I have kids, he's all of a sudden going to become this huge cleaner of the home, right? And that's a false expectation. If he wasn't a cleaner before, he may not be a cleaner later. Does he clean? Yes. Does he clean to my standards? No, because we have different ways of doing things, right? So that might not be desired outcome. So if I say, hey, I want you to help more around the house, my unrealistic expectation may say, I want you to clean like me, right? But maybe the desired outcome is say, can you support me in what I want to do? And then I might ask to do things that maybe I want done, but I really don't want to do, like cleaning a bathroom. I hate cleaning a bathroom, but I want a clean bathroom. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comment. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Right? I'd love to hear from you. So here's just an extra, and I mentioned this earlier in the video, but I just want to reiterate it. If you go through these 4 things and you start to learn some things about you, right? Hopefully that's what this was doing. You're going to learn some more things about you. You hopefully will also learn some things about your spouse. Now, you may not like everything that you learn about you. You also may not like everything that you learn about your spouse. But I want you to accept it as true. Because if you go through these steps, there's no room for misinterpretation. It may not be the desired outcome, but it may actually be the factual outcome. So it just means that you have a clearer insight into who you are, who your spouse is, and then your relationship as a whole. And then once you get clear on this communication, we've thrown the nagging out the way, right? Once we get clear on this communication, now you have an informed decision to navigate the relationship of what feels best for you, what's best for your spouse, and then what's best for both of you all as a whole. So I hope you enjoyed these tips. Please click subscribe at the bottom. We drop videos every week. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And check the show notes. I have a free offer for you and hope you enjoy it. All right, take care.